feel like Madonna with this on. I feel like I should be going, Vogue, Vogue. Sorry, I'm supposed to talk about something sensible. So my name's Natasha Donovan, and I have a question for you. If you knew you were dying and had less than 12 months to live, would you want to know? Would you talk about it? Okay, show me. Let's have a raise of hands. Raise your hands if you'd like to know if you had less than 12 months to live. See, it still splits the room, but quite a few of you. So why do we struggle to talk about it? Why as a society, especially us Brits, we're horrendous, we're rubbish at talking about death and dying? Why? What about cancer? That's another word. Oh, don't mention the C word. No, mustn't talk about cancer either. Death, dying, and cancer all seem to be taboo words. But why? Why can't we normalise talking about these? On Christmas Day in 2008, I was lying in a hospital bed. You see, what happened to me is after a routine smear test, I'd been diagnosed with something called dyskaryosis 3. Now, to me, that still sounds like it should be a Greek holiday resort just north of Mykonos. But it's not. It's actually the name of precancerous cells of a woman's cervix. So I had to have these cells removed, and it's this thing called a loop, a kind of laser thing. They removed these cells, and the doctors assured me all was well. But I had to go back 6 months later, just for a checkup and see how these cells were doing. I went back 6 months later, dyskaryosis 3 was still there, so another laser procedure. 6 months later, another laser procedure. These slippery suckers were not moving. So now they wanted to do something called a cold knife cone biopsy. Cold knife? In my vagina? Could you not heat it and run it under a warm tap? These are the things we have to think of. So I had the cold knife cone biopsy. They knocked me out for it, so it's fine. But when I sat with that doctor getting those results, he was telling me about the cell changes were now even larger. I mean, I'm not being funny. How large is a cervix? It doesn't seem that large. How much do we have to keep removing? So this time he said possibly a hysterectomy might be needed. But I was going to have an MRI scan first. But he said, I'll tell you what, we'll have you in. I'll give your womb a good tug. Let's see how easy that womb comes away. Let's see how loose it is. Because that might help me decide which hysterectomy to give you. Because apparently there's 3 types. Can I just stop and back up a minute there? Did you hear me? Womb tug. A womb tug. That still makes me go like this, and I hope it did make you, including the men. That sounded horrible. The thought of somebody going into my womb and giving it a good old tug sounded painful. And then I thought, well, what about after I've had that? What about if I'm Sainsbury's? Or heaven forbid I'm in Waitrose, strolling through the aisles. Flop! Out drops my womb. Turns out it was more loose than we realised. Do I pick it up? Here you go. Do you know what? Knowing me, I'd probably boot it under a counter and run away. But these are the things that were going through my head with that phrase and that word. So I had the MRI scan, and then I was changed to another hospital. I thought, this must be where they specialise in womb tugs. You know, that's got to be a specialist kind of craft. But the week leading up to that appointment, I was in turmoil. I did not want to have that womb tug. It sounded painful. It sounded unnecessary. We was now getting near Christmas. I thought, it's not an urgent procedure. Surely this can wait till the new year. And then I thought, and if I need a hysterectomy, all the womb tugs in the world are not going to change that fact. So just get on with it. But actually, I did go for the appointment. And you are going to be so glad to hear, I did not need a womb tug. Yes! Yay! No. What I actually needed was biopsies of my bowel, my bladder, my stomach, and my womb. I know. Because you know what the doctor forgot to tell me when he was telling me about womb tugs and cell changes? He forgot to tell me that I had cancer. Yes, and I had cervical cancer. And this wasn't a womb tug hospital, it was a cancer specialist centre. And my cancer had now spread and was threatening my life. Now those words stayed in my head forevermore, womb tug. I wish that doctor had discussed cancer with me. I wish with all my heart that doctor had just said cancer. Then I would have understood how serious that appointment was. Because let me tell you, audience, had I not gone to that silly womb tug appointment, I would be dead and I would not be standing here today. So I got to thinking, what is it about this? Why do we fear talking about death and dying and cancer? I mean, who are we actually protecting? And why do we feel we need to be protected from being told we're dying? While I was in hospital, I met this gentleman, and he was having palliative care, end-of-life palliative care. And we were chatting away. He was very ill. We were chatting away, and he was telling me all about his palliative nurses, and his palliative chemotherapy, and his palliative radiotherapy. This is good. This man knows what's going on. It weren't quite like that. I don't know if you can think of maybe a discussion that wasn't had, or maybe a word that a patient might not understand. For him, it was the word palliative. He didn't know what that meant. He didn't know for him that meant end of life. He thought that was just the name of cancer treatment. It's called palliative because it was curing him. When he realised that he was actually dying, he didn't talk for 2 days, and then he died on the 3rd. So why don't we normalise talking about dying? If someone had had the discussion with this gentleman about he was dying or death, they could have found out that actually his wishes were to go back home to the Caribbean and die there. And had he known he was dying when he was 18 months previously, when he was diagnosed, he could have fulfilled that wish. But we don't like talking about death, do we? We mustn't talk about it. So lying in that hospital bed, I thought, there needs to be a change. I want to make a change with how patient and doctors interact. I want to make a change about how we talk about death and dying and cancer. How do you do this? I thought, you know what? Go to the beginning. Go to the very core of where our wonderful doctors and nurses learn this. Go to med school. Teach students to normalise talking about death, dying and cancer. For they're the doctors of the future, and they will be the ones having these conversations. We need to normalise when we cannot add days to life, we need to add life to days. So I got educated. And I'm now a teaching fellow in clinical education. I work for the NHS, and I do teach in one of the best medical schools in the country. I like to use a little bit of humour, and I use a lot of experience to teach my students, because I feel that helps, because talking about cancer and death and dying can be quite daunting. We call these sessions in the medical world breaking bad news. And I tell the students, empower yourself, for you can break bad news well. Look, I would laugh. If my cancer comes back this time, I'm probably going to die from it. That's fine. And I'd find it really funny if my doctor said to me, you know what, Tash? Don't go buying Christmas presents. You're not going to be able to give them out this year. I would find that funny. But I appreciate most of you wouldn't. But the point is, let's get through the crap. Let's talk about death and dying. Let's talk about funerals. We don't talk about funerals. I've planned 5. I know. Do you know how dull it is? Do you know, I've had 17 abdominal surgeries. I've had half my liver removed. Do you know, I should not be this fat with so few internal organs. This is not fair. I've got the fat cancer. I've been given the last rites twice. I've been in intensive care units more times than I can count. And like I said, funerals, that's another thing we don't talk about. We celebrate 18th and 21st and leaving your job. We should celebrate a funeral. Do you know how dull it is? My first funeral, I thought it was a really good idea to be stuffed and mounted. You know, like a bear. You know, you see in the stately homes or in the ski lodges. Oh, that's a good idea. So I actually phoned a taxidermist and asked him, If any of you are interested, it's actually illegal. You can stuff a moose, you can stuff a stag, but you can't stuff a human. And then I was even more disappointed because I thought it was genius. I could be stuffed and put on wheels. And then my family could wheel me out for special occasions. And I could actually be stuffed in a pose. I could hand around canopies and drinks. My second funeral, I thought, a Viking funeral, that'd be fun. My brother could fire the arrow with the flames, off the Thames. But the council said no, because that's illegal. I did offer to take out the fireworks, but that made no difference. My third funeral was, we discussed the garden, but the kids went, remember what happened when we buried Flopsy the bunny? Foxes might dig you up. A little bit of evilness in me thought that might be quite amusing, but no. But actually at the time that was illegal. So my last one was, I think, chuck me overboard at sea. But you can see the pattern. That's also illegal. Funerals are so dull in this country. It's burn you, bury you, or chuck you in some wood with bluebells. So I thought, all right, I'll agree with cremation. But these eyelashes, you've got to save them. And my daughter's got to wear them on her 18th birthday. I didn't give it any thought until my daughter reached her 18th birthday. I said, Mum, thank God you survived. I was like, oh. She went, no, the thought of my birthday, of going, happy birthday to me, happy birthday to me, putting on your eyelashes, everyone's going, but it's what your mother wanted. But we wouldn't know this if we hadn't discussed death and dying. I can say these things because I have. My family know that should my cancer come back, I'm not having no treatment, sod that. I don't want anything. I don't want endless visits to the hospital. I don't want daily pain. I don't want poking and prodding anymore. I want morphine. Bring on the morphine fairy, you know. Let me go off with dignity and some pride. But I also feel, and this is a controversial point of view, but it's mine, I've been there and I can say it, I don't believe our NHS is a bottomless pit of money. Please do not waste precious funds on giving me a few more months to live. Please spend that money on a life you can save. But I can have these views because I discuss death and dying. I'm popular at dinner parties. COVID has been really hard for us all. And people have lost families in the most dreadful, dreadful ways. And we've all been worried about, what if we catch it? What if we catch it? And that's the good thing we need to look at this pandemic. We need to think of, this got us discussing death and dying. Because how many of you here started talking about, I don't want a ventilator, I'm not going on that. Now you all know what one is. You know what it means to be put on one. And families are talking about death and dying because of what we've all seen on the news and in the papers. We need to keep this going. Our healthcare workers have been through hell. And they stepped up. They had to discuss dying in ways they weren't prepared for. They could not sidestep it. They had to face it head on. They had to break these news with families that were hearing it over the telephone, or patients dying alone. We owe it to them to keep discussing death, to think about putting our end-of-life wishes into plans that we share with our families. We need to talk about DNRs and CPR and what it actually means to have that done. You don't want strangers deciding that for you, or your family members when they're feeling irrational, and then they have to live with the guilt of the decision they made that day. You can organise that now. Signing a DNR for someone you love doesn't mean you're giving up on them. It means you're actually supporting them in having a dignified death. Think about your own wishes, your own end-of-life arrangements. Think about patients having this knowledge to have the power to think about your exit from this world. We need patients. So if they want to opt out of treatments, they can. How can a patient make a wise choice if they don't know their prognosis? We really need to keep these conversations going and thinking about what our wishes are. I urge you all to make your wishes clear of your end-of-life choices while you still have the voice to express it. Healthcare professionals, please keep telling the facts. Please keep communicating. And most of all, be truthful with the patients. Giving unrealistic hope to patients who are dying is not fair. They shouldn't be chasing treatments and endless hope and daily visits. They should be allowed to die with dignity, peace, and love. I don't want the impact of this talk to upset any of you. I want the impact of this talk to make you all make these changes, to have control over how you leave this earth. Look, I really love life. I love it. I have a great time. I've got a lovely family and lovely friends. I love life. But for me, not at any cost. I will always put quality before quantity. So, my name's Natasha Donovan, and I have a question for you. If you had less than 12 months to live, would you want to know? And would you talk about it? Thank you.